There we go, we're recording. So everybody who's popping in, I'm literally going to give it another minute for everyone to come in. Do make sure you've got a drink. We're online now for the next hour from 7 till 8 p.m. So it's really lovely to see so many of you here. I think we've had almost 290 people register, so we'll see who pops in today. But we will definitely have time for questions, definitely have time for people to make comments. Can I just check? We've got a couple of people who are going to be speaking. Our lovely ambassador, Jules Lewis. Jules, are you around? Can you unmute yourself? Hi, Jules. Hi, lovely to see you. You've got your National Grief t-shirt on, fantastic. And Natasha Bulstrode. I hope you're online. Natasha's going to have a little chat later as well.
Unmute me. Hello. Hi.
Hi, Natasha.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Don.
Really brilliant. Right, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start because I'm sure we've got a lot to say this evening. So huge thanks for everybody for taking the time during National Grief Awareness Week. For those of you who don't know what this campaign is, we're the Good Grief Trust. I'm Linda Magistris and I'm Chief Executive and founder of the charity. I started the charity when I lost my partner 7 years ago to cancer and realised actually we needed to bring all those incredible support services, those charities, those helplines together under one umbrella, and that's what we've done. So this campaign takes place every year. It's our third year. It's quite a new campaign, but it's growing. And as we saw last year, it was needed more than ever. So it happens between the 2nd and the 8th of December. And this is one of our lovely events. So do check online, nationalgriefawarenessweek.org, because there'll be lots of other events and lots of other charities, support services and organisations putting together some brilliant chats, talks, workshops, pop-up cafes, etc. So without further ado, let me introduce our special guests this evening. So we have Dr. Kathryn Mannix and Greg Wise. I'm sure everybody is very familiar with both our guests this evening. So Dr. Kathryn Mannix is a palliative care consultant. She's retired now, but she had an incredible career and she was a pioneer in palliative care medicine, and she actually started the first CBT clinic exclusively for palliative care patients. And she is an author, and she has this wonderful book out at the moment. It's called Listen, but she's also a best-selling author of With the End in Mind. So please do look out for those books because they will give us a wealth of information, advice and guidance that perhaps we struggle to sort of cope with really when we're bereaved, and also when we haven't maybe had that experience. And we have Greg Wise, and I'm sure again so many of you will know exactly who Greg Wise is. He's an actor, he's a producer,
retired dancer from
Strictly. Wonderful 007 performance in Strictly. And of course, he played the role of John Willoughby in Sense and Sensibility, where he met his wife, Emma Thompson. And we welcome both of you. So thank you so much. And Greg is also an author. He's written a book called Not That Kind of Love, which is, he finished the book, which was started as a blog by his sister Claire, who sadly died 5 years ago of cancer, and Greg was her sole carer. So welcome both of you. And tonight is all about trying to help us all open up those taboos, bust the taboos, and find the words that we can have in our vocabulary to help those people who are bereaved, and try, if we can, to reach out in the right way. There's no right way to grieve, obviously, and there's no wrong way to grieve, but perhaps there is a kind and tender way to have a conversation. So maybe let me hand over to Kathryn first of all. Kathryn, let me just ask about your book, Listen. Obviously, listen is a hugely important word. And why did you write the book, Kathryn?
So thank you, and hello everybody. Thanks for turning up on a Monday evening to join us. I originally wrote a book about dying called With the End in Mind, which was to help people to understand the ordinary process of dying. And I didn't think I was ever going to write another book. That was my kind of end of my palliative care career, writing. But I had a huge correspondence from that first book from lots and lots of people saying, we need to talk about these things, but I don't know how. I don't know where to start. I'm worried if I open my mouth, the wrong thing will come out. I'm worried if I mention the person who's died, the bereaved person will collapse into floods of tears. I'm worried if I mention the fact that my mum's getting very forgetful, I'll just terrify her and nothing will ever be the same again. I don't know how to explain to my children what I want towards the end of my life. So all of this kind of willingness to talk, but this trepidation about talking in a way that is in some way harmful. And my experience from 30 years in palliative care is that the most harmful thing is saying nothing, is leaving people on their own, is turning away because you're embarrassed when you see them in the supermarket because you know they've had bad news recently and you're not quite sure what to say. So sick people who I've looked after, or bereaved people who are the survivors of people that I've looked after, have all described this kind of huge loneliness that's the additional weight that they're carrying, as well as the illness or the bereavement that they're carrying. So Listen is a book for everybody. It's not a medical book, and it's really about how we have those conversations, and the clue is in the name, really. I think we think we're supposed to say the right thing, and actually there is not a right thing to say. When a person has died, nothing we say is going to bring them back. But we can listen when people want to talk to us about how they feel, whether it's about the person who's died, whether it's about their recent difficult diagnosis, whether it's about the fact that their child doesn't seem to be developing in the same way as other children in their class and they're worried about that, or their career plans have gone asunder, they've been bereaved because it's not a person but it's a career, it's a redundancy. There are all sorts of losses in life, and we can support people by being their companions there. So I've called it How to Find the Words for Tender Conversations, because I think that the thing we need to bring with us is just a willingness to be tender, to be present, and so the messages for this week: stick the kettle on, stop for a chat, just make ourselves available, but really let the other person be in charge of what it is that they ask us to do. So it's turning up, being available, and then letting the other person take the lead.
And in one of your chapters, Getting Started, it says, beginning a conversation about difficult truths can feel daunting because we fear making somebody feel distressed. Of course, a conversation does not cause the distress. The difficult situation the person is in causes their distress. So what do you think about that, Greg? I remember you said in one of our films that you made that, we're all in childish denial, that we should, that we're going to get out of this. So, how would you help people to maybe think about maybe opening up their minds to sort of a conversation that they would feel comfortable with?
Well, we're unfortunately, we're incredibly rubbish in this country, aren't we, with all of this? And I remember when my sister died, and in fact, before she died, when she was very ill, that I found often more than the energy that I needed caring for my sister was energy that I needed dealing with the neurosis of her friends. And the neurosis about life-limiting illness and where that will lead to death, because none of us has a relationship with it. Very few of us. The people, hopefully the people here this evening who've joined us, have a relationship with it or are wanting to try and foster a relationship with it. And I wrote about it in terms of it is a language that we haven't been taught. It is a whole new language, and we just haven't got the vocabulary, we haven't got the grammar, we can't structure the sentences because we haven't been taught it. And I found that in actually many ways, I suffered from that hugely before my sister died, because of course, the older you get, the more friends you have, the more family members you have who are suffering bereavement. And I would feel equally embarrassed about, oh my goodness me, I have to write the letter, or I have to make the phone call, or I have to ring the doorbell. And I didn't know the words. And I think one of the extraordinary things about Kathryn's book is often you don't need the words. You need to create a space where the words can be spoken, and you can be there as a sounding board, as a comfort, because I think one of the things that comes across as well with our difficulty of speaking is that we all in some ways think that we know what the answers are, and no one knows any of the answers in life generally, and no one knows what this other person is going through. And if we are able, and it does take a courage to turn up somewhere without a physical agenda and just to see what is coming off the other person, because we don't know if they want to be hugged or they don't want to be hugged, if they want to talk or they want to sit in silence, if they want to be touched or not to be touched. And we have to be brave enough, I think. Let's talk to Kathryn after I've finished burbling on about, we don't set the agenda, they set the agenda. And we have to just try, as Kathryn says, to be tender.
Well, absolutely. And again, coming to you, Kathryn, I've reading an excerpt here. It says in your book, when was the last time you really felt listened to? Exactly what you're saying, Greg. When you felt that someone appreciated not only the words you were saying, but why the matter under discussion was important to you? How did that person show that they were paying attention to you? What we're considering here is not simply being listened to, but being heard. And how important is that? Those words are so powerful, Kathryn.
And it is interesting, isn't it, how much noise we make when we should be listening, that somehow the person starts to get upset and we start to say, oh, I'm sorry, I've upset you, and I'm going to change the subject now, instead of sitting there and saying, oh, this is upsetting, isn't it? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You know, I can give you a tissue. Would you like me to just sit here? What would help you now? I can just be here while you're sad. I can go over there and stick the kettle on. I can get you another set of tissues. We can change the subject if you like, but if you want to just sit here and be sad, that's okay too. And then shut up. And the hardest thing is to be quiet, because we can feel this kind of kindness that manifests as helpfulness bubbling up inside, and we want to make it better. Don't cry. Let's change the subject. Talk about anything else. Alert, alert. And actually to just sit and be quiet and to say, this is really hard. I see it's really hard. Would you like me to stay? Would you rather be on your own? I don't mind if you feel sad, if you don't mind being sad with me.
Yeah. And that is so important, isn't it? And I remember seeing a documentary with Roman Kemp talking about suicide. And he said, you know, when you're asking people who perhaps are bereaved through any circumstance, but he said, ask them, are they okay? And then ask them again, are you okay? Because, you know, the first time people might say, yeah, I'm fine, because they don't know how to open up that conversation. Then maybe they think, oh gosh, I don't know what I'm going to get back. But if you allowed them and you gave them the time, like you're saying, and you say, yeah, but are you really okay? Yeah. You know, that maybe would, and you know, we had our launch event, which we both kindly came to for National Grief Awareness Week, and Hannah Ingram Moore was there speaking, and she said the same thing. She said, when you ask the question, you have to be prepared for the answer. And if you don't want to hear the answer, then don't ask the question. And I think that applies a lot with the bereaved, doesn't it? Because, you know, we do cry, you know, and we do get incredibly upset, but it's natural. And we've got to really just allow us to be natural and normal with those emotions.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And the other thing is that you're talking about asking questions. We feel as though we should be saying something that makes it all better. And there isn't a thing that's going to make it all better. So asking questions is actually a much better way of approaching it. But sometimes the question we ask is itself too big. And I really got this from Sheryl Sandberg, who used to be, well, she's the chief operating officer for Facebook.
I think so.
And she was widowed. And she wrote this remarkable thing about when people say, you know, genuinely concerned, how are you? She said, that's too big. I can't answer that. How do you answer, how are you? My life is changed beyond any recognition of who I was before my husband died. So ask a littler question. How are you this morning? How are things today? You know, how are you doing just now? And that's answerable. We know where we are within our grief right now, and we know whether now is an okay time to talk, or whether actually I'm just about on the edge here and I just want to get around the supermarket and out. Thank you for asking, I'm off. So asking a question and then being sensitive to whether the response invites a further question or is an acknowledgement of thanks for asking, it's okay right now, and the body language is saying I need to be left alone, or whether the body language is saying, and if you want to ask me another question, that's okay.
Yeah, because as we know, grief can change on an hourly basis, let alone a daily or a weekly or monthly. And that's so important, isn't it? Because again, maybe friends and family and work colleagues, if they get, if you like, rejected by the bereaved person, and then maybe they think then you can't go in again. But please do ask again, you know, keep asking. Keep WhatsApping and texting and just checking in on somebody. And that, again, that's obviously one of our posters and one of our key messages for Grief Awareness Week is checking on your neighbours. You know, stop for a chat. I mean, I did it yesterday. I was going for a walk on the beach and we just happened to meet an older lady and stop for a chat. I didn't know where I was going. And she was widowed. She'd lost her husband 18 years ago. And we practically became best buddies. She asked if we would like to look in her garden and we looked at the lovely view. And it was just giving people time. You know, instead of, it's so important, isn't it, just to slow down a little bit. What do you think, Greg?
No, I think we the issue here is we're obviously all of us wonderful, lovely people are here in this space because we have a knowledge, we have an empathy, we have a history with this. But I feel that it's still, grief is still treated almost as a four-letter word. That there is not just a sense of, oh, stop it, it's morbid, or it's too real, but there's some, it can feel like it's too intrusive to either express it in front of someone else or for someone else to ask how you're feeling. So we have to try and find a way of making this everyday conversational, because grief is one of the purest and actually one of the most required feelings that we will feel, because it is, without being able to express it and go with it, not get in the way of it, not judge it, not judge ourselves. The grief we feel because the universe is balanced equals the love we felt. So we have to be able to have this come through. And I know with me, it would surprise me coming through as a vomit often. And it is a cleanse, and it has to be let through. And without letting it through, we will become physically ill. This is the problem, and mentally ill, obviously, as well. So we have to be able to find a way of, and it's mad because everyone grieves countless times in their lives. And why we are unable still to be able to express and to share. And we don't want to make that about shame either, because as I said earlier on, because we don't know the language, so there has to be the tenderness that Kathryn talks about. There has to be tenderness. Because it isn't complicated. Grief isn't complicated. Our response to it is complicated. Yeah. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, you're really right there. And that thing about the balance between the love and the pain of grieving is really important, isn't it? Because once a person has died that we love, we want to be able to enjoy the memories. We want to be able to think about them fondly. But it's almost like the doorway into that is grieving. That the grief is the step you take through to get to the place where they still are for us in our memories. So it's almost the price of the love, isn't it? And that's okay, even though it's terrible. So I know that I have bereaved friends who love that their child who died in his teens, they still get messages from his school friends who are now young people out in the world. And they send messages that say, you know, I was just thinking about him today and I was remembering that time when we, or, you know, such and such happened today. And it just made me remember how much we laughed when. And what it's saying to his mum and dad is, we're carrying him. He's in our hearts. He's out in the world. And what's really lovely is those kids, well, they're grown-ups now, those young adults are not worried about sending those texts to those parents. They know they'll be like arrows into their hearts, and that it's worth it because the parents have got back to them to say, we love to hear you remembering, because we don't forget. We remember every single day. Don't think you're reminding us. All you're reminding us of is that you love him too.
Yeah. And that's exactly, and that reminds me actually, Kathryn, of this quote, which is one of our most popular, and we hope that, you know, this might help somebody as well. It's exactly what you've just said. So if you know someone who has lost a very important person in their life and you're afraid to mention them because you think you may make them sad by reminding them that they died, you're not reminding them. They didn't forget that they died. What you're reminding them of is that you remember that they lived, and that's a great, great gift. And that's exactly, it's allowing us to speak the name. And again, say their name is another big popular hashtag that we all use. You know, it's such a wonderful joy when somebody uses the name of the person who's died, or the child, or whoever it is that's been lost. Because we do remember them. They haven't gone anywhere. They're just not physically here, isn't it, really? Like you said, Greg, and Strictly, that Claire was there with you on the dance floor as a disco diva. You know, she's always going to be there with you.
Yeah, and I truly believe that the relationship doesn't end; it just morphs. It can't end. Death is the end physically, but I still have a very powerful relationship with my sister, who's now been dead for 5 years, and it's welcoming that and coming back to why we're all here, the grieving of it. The grieving purifies, in a way, purifies the thought and the memory and where it sits. And it took probably a year, 2 years after my sister died, because she had cancer and she got very ill, and she changed very much physically, obviously, with her illness. But within a couple of years, she would come back to me in my dreamscapes as the healthy, happy, funny, wonderful sister. And that is sensational. But that meeting of the healthy one, I think, could only come because I was able to, and I was lucky enough to be able to process the grief and the trauma, and I was lucky enough to have people around me who helped me.
Mm. And we've got so many questions, gosh, in the chat, so many questions. And John was mentioning, you know, should we start early on? Should the children, you know, in the schools be given that language? Should we put it into that curriculum and make it much more normal and natural as part of our life and our death, you know, life lessons, really?
Kathryn,
Greg,
you have a wonderful story, don't you, about a recent occurrence with the Department of Education, don't you?
Oh, I'm trying to think what the story might be. The story I was going to tell was the school guinea pigs.
The school guinea pigs.
School guinea pigs. I was asked this question at a public meeting, and I said yes. And actually, what would be great would be if all schools had pets, and the pets had a short enough lifespan that you know, in the course of being at primary school, you could see baby guinea pigs being born and becoming big and becoming mummy and daddy guinea pigs, and then becoming granny and grandpa guinea pigs, and then being dead guinea pigs. And then also we can talk about decomposition and burial and nature cycles and all the rest of it. And at the end, a palliative care nurse came up to me at the end of this talk, and she said, there's a problem with school guinea pigs. My husband is a vet, and he informs me that school guinea pigs have approximately 12 times the life expectancy of any other guinea pig. And it's because anytime they start looking peaky, they get given to one of the school families to look after, and they come back looking very much healthier, although possibly a slightly different colour. And there's no discussion of the death of the guinea pig. They simply re-energize, like, you know, Doctor Who in a new form. So yes, we need to be talking about death and grief right from the beginning of school. We need to not impose our adult scaredness of talking about stuff on children who are interested and intrigued and not yet scared of talking about it. The number of deaths in the UK is such that in any class of 30 children, there will be at least one significantly bereaved child, bereaved of a sibling or a parent or a grandparent or somebody who was close and significant to them. And if they can't bring that distress into school, if that's a thing that we have to be silent about and not talk about, then that is not okay. And yet teachers in training are not taught how to prepare a class to welcome a bereaved child back into school. They're not taught how to support a child who's dying during school, although very often outreach palliative care nurses are very good at getting into schools and helping individual classes stay in touch with dying children. But we've absolutely got to be able to give kids the words, the vocabulary, the model. And then last week on Facebook, I saw somebody post a picture, which is a Lego funeral set. And I think that's a step in the right direction, folks.
We've seen those. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
fantastic.
It's a way to open up a gentle conversation, a tender conversation, isn't it, in those early years. But let me just introduce another guest to the mix. Jules Lewis is our ambassador at the Good Grief Trust, and she's end of life and bereavement lead at Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust. And she obviously works very closely with bereaved families, but she also works with the health professionals as well. So Jules, welcome.
Hi.
Hi. And Jules has put together some incredibly valuable videos. So please do look on our YouTube channel. We have over 150 videos from the bereaved, from the health professionals, and people just trying to explain how they feel in the most sort of clear way, really. So Jules, maybe talk about around the language that we really need to hear, for example, very early days when you're bereaved, what helps and what doesn't help, really.
Yeah, so obviously what everyone's saying this evening, it just rings so true with me and my day-to-day work, but it is being guided by the person you're talking to, which is absolutely key. I do say the words, dying, sick enough to die, but if they do want to use the words they've passed away, then that's absolutely fine. But I do like to use the words dying, sick enough to die, and a lot of Kathryn Mannix's book, I use a lot, and I'm very grateful. It's about using kind language. I've been supporting a lot of bereaved staff during the pandemic, and a lot of staff have told me when they've come back to work that staff have avoided having a conversation with them, and that's quite shocking, really, when we work in health, and we really do need to allow them to come back to work in a kind and compassionate place. And again, it's about, there is no right or wrong thing to say. We can't take away the awful pain that they've gone through, but we can be there and we can offer our support and we can really listen. But it's about that kind language. We hear a lot of healthcare professionals using the words, would you like to view your mum? you visit your loved ones when they are at end of life. You visit them to say goodbye. We don't view anybody other than maybe you'd view a house. You know, name the person, don't say body. It needs to be the person, especially with the police force and ambulance when there's been a sudden death, you know, a suicide maybe. It's really important that we say the person's name and we are kind and we don't use old-fashioned language like they committed suicide, they took their own life, bereaved by suicide. These little tweaks with our language can make a massive difference. You know, I've spent a bit of time talking to people, and obviously we've been chatting to Christine Flack, Caroline's mum, and it's so important that we use kind language in every situation and support, you know, all the bereaved, but our bereaved staff as well. And I did the little film. It's 5 minutes long, which isn't much. I did it for Connell, actually, who's a great supporter of the Good Grief Trust, and he asked me would I do it for a workshop that he's doing this week. I've always wanted to do it because I think it's so important that we use kind language, but he asked me would I help, and I've done it for him. And I do suggest you watch the whole little video, because it does talk about my beautiful friend that took her own life over 2 years ago now. And, you know, you can't take away the pain that I feel every day. And like Greg has just said, I'm lucky enough to have her coming into my dreams well and happy, like she always was. She was mad. We were always dancing and singing and having so much fun. And that's how I see her now. But, you know, that's because I've got good people around me and I've been able to grieve in a healthy way. But people will get upset. I get upset when I talk about her all the time, but I love talking about her. I absolutely love it because she was beautiful inside and out. She was the best nurse ever, the best friend ever, mum, wife, daughter, and I love talking about her. And if you ask people about their loved one and say their name, they come alive, they talk about them. Yes, they might cry, but that's okay. And if we can carry tissues around and encourage people to you know, talk about their loved one, it's so important. So I read a lot of Kathryn Mannix's work. I absolutely, I was so pleased to meet both of you, Greg and Kath, on the launch last Thursday. And keep writing, not keep dancing anymore, Greg. keep writing. But, you know, you really help us every day at work, and we signpost the Good Grief Trust. And you know, if I can help one person by somebody watching that film, then that little video, then that's all I ask. But I'm so passionate about improving end-of-life care and bereavement and the language we use. Just please use kind language. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Thank you for everything you do. So we've got, as I said, we've got so much happening in the chat, which is brilliant. Beverly has said, I always think it's the intentions behind the words and the language, as people will forgive you many things when they know that the intentions were the right intentions, the thought behind the words. And I think, I mean, for me personally, and I know many of the people that we support at the Good Grief Trust, you know, sadly, friends and family do say things that are really, you know, very upsetting, actually. You know, at funerals, people have said, for a widow, for example, oh, well, you're young enough to remarry, or, you know, oh, well, you can have another child, all these incredibly hurtful things, but they are trying to help. I'm assuming they're trying to help. But sadly, people get very angry, they get very resentful and very bitter. And of course, then you lose not only you've got your grief, but you also lose your network. It's like someone's pulled out that carpet from under you again. And it is very, very difficult when someone says that. And sadly, we know that many, many best friends have not been rekindled. You know, those friendships you've been lost, and that's so sad. So this webinar and all the messaging that we're trying to get out tonight, and obviously through the Good Grief Trust and everything else, is to try and keep that message going, keep that awareness going. Kathryn.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Brene Brown talks about at least isms. So if you hear the words at least coming into your mouth, that's the thing not to say. There are very few things that are the wrong thing to say, but that is one of them. But it comes from an interesting place. It comes from a place of saying, how can we make this awfulness that you're feeling into something that's a little bit less awful? And it's trying in some way to be helpful. So I think that one of the things we have to understand as supporters of people who are grieving is that it isn't our job to make it better. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to witness. We're here to support. We're here so somebody's not lonely in their grieving. We're like a candle in the dark. It's tiny. It's making a little bit of difference. But that's okay.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Greg?
No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. We make mistakes because we don't know what we're talking about. I mean, honestly, it's that simple. And we all, I think everyone, bar a few people on this planet, everyone wants to try and be kind, but we sometimes just get in the way of it because we get embarrassed and because we haven't been shown how to be. We haven't been taught how to be. It's not within the structure of our family unit and the structure of our societal units. We haven't seen it. And I know I'm a huge, I get terrible Tourette's as well. So I always have to be so mindful and speak very, very slowly and always try and be at least 3 or 4 words ahead of what's coming out of my mouth, because I'm constantly throwing myself into great pitfalls. If it's a proper chum who's having a conversation to you as a bereaved person, I'm sure you will be able to forgive some of the terrible things that drop out of their mouths, because it is a highly charged situation. And if neither of us, like Kathryn, is a professional knowing how to run this highly charged conversation, there's going to be moments, and often there will be moments that will hopefully make us giggle. Maybe not at that moment, but later on. Because we're all just scrabbling around in this emotional darkness. That's the problem.
And I must say that even being a person who, ran a psychotherapy clinic for many years, it doesn't really change how difficult it felt when it was my person and not my patient that I was dealing with. And I remember going around to visit a very, very dear friend who'd had a catastrophic loss, and I'd heard about it. And I had no idea what to say. And I remember standing by the front gate thinking of all of the other things that I needed to do that day, that maybe I should do them first before I knocked on that door. And then eventually I knocked on the door, and then I realized that I wanted to run away and I had to make my feet stay there. And when she opened the door and looked at me, what came out of my mouth was, I don't know what to say. And that was exactly the right thing to say. And she just opened her arms, I opened my arms, and we just stood on the step and leant on each other, and there wasn't anything to say. And actually, do you know what? When we don't know what to say, why don't we just say, I don't know what to say? Turns out that works.
Oh gosh, speaking our language, Kathryn, that's what we say all the time. If you don't have the words, just say, I am so sorry, but I don't know what to say. And as you said, people then hopefully will welcome you with open arms, because they really need, we really need to speak. Can I just introduce somebody else now? So I recently met Natasha. She's her lovely husband has helped us for National Grief Awareness Week, did a lot of our editing, and we're so appreciative of both Natasha and David, her husband. But Natasha sadly lost her brother when he was only 15 in a really quite traumatic situation, and she's had sadly a catalogue of losses over her time. So Natasha, let me just introduce you to everybody, and perhaps you can let us know if anyone's helped you, what sort of words have helped you maybe. So welcome, Natasha Bulstrode.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. Just to be here is such a privilege and honour. I met Greg very kindly the other day. He said hello, thank you, and also met Dr. Mannix. That I'm a quarter way through her book, and it should be on the NHS, shouldn't it? I mean, everyone should be reading that book. It's a magical book. I mean, I'm a parent of a 13-year-old and a 6-year-old as well, so it's just already a language of love. Thank you so much. And I've just been reading a lot of the chat. This is a lot of people here have been through huge grief and loss, and I'm so sorry to read and read about your loss here. Yeah, there is an empathy that we all understand here, because we're all either in the industry or we have had great losses. My brother, I was the last person to see him. I was 18 years old, and he turned around to me and said, good night, my sister, I love you, in a very funny little accent. It was very strange. And he then got on a bike and he cycled down a hill and went into a tree and hit his head very, very badly in a devastating way. And about a week later, we as a family had to turn his life support off. My mum, a very, very quick backstory, was the youngest of 10, and she came from quite a very abusive family. She left Scotland when she was 14, and she met my father when she was 17 in a very beautiful love relationship. And they tried desperately to create a very beautiful life for themselves, an abundant life for themselves, because they'd had really shit childhoods. So losing my brother to my mother was just a devastating blow. It was a weird thing. She'd kind of thought she'd made it and she had created this beautiful life for herself. But then the knock and loss of Alexander damn near killed her herself. But being a fantastic Scot, she just had to rise up. And we had all of the situations happen around our grief. I lost it, and it was the early 90s. And I thought dancing on tables and drinking a lot was a good idea. No one obviously in the early 90s knew about mental health, and no one sat me down and helped me at all. I had to find my own way back from that. My mum said she can't remember making a meal for 5 years. She was so devastated by the loss of him. And my father had loads and loads of ailments physically, because he never saw a grief counsellor or got any help at all. From kind of encephalitis to cellulitis to kind of every hepatitis to every itis under the sun. So it manifested physically for my father. Me, I just kind of went into a wild place, and my mum was very stoic and just kept moving. And she drank a lot, sadly. She died in April this year. And we think that she probably died of cancer, but we think probably of a broken heart as well, because she didn't get, God, it's going to make me cry, but she didn't get the help that she needed. So this is obviously just a hugely passionate thing for me, to be able to find the language for us all. Women would hide in Marks and Spencer's when they saw her, because again, they were too frightened to approach her and they didn't know what to say. Her best friend, after 2 years, turned around and said to her, "Are you not over it yet?" And she never spoke to her again, which again was a devastating thing, because not only did one of her best friends not know how to understand or again sit with her, they just, "Are you not over it yet?" We used to say a lot, "I want to write a book, so don't nick it, Kathryn." Called She Didn't Know, because we would rock a lot and we would kind of say, "I just don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't understand, I don't know," and so we would just, that was a kind of mantra. It was weird, and I hold that still. I have had a lot more help now with the loss of my mum, and I do meditation and yoga. I don't drink alcohol. I sit with my feelings. I go for long walks. I started doing a thing called a grief walk on Instagram. It was just more of a diary, thing where I can, as Greg said about kind of vomiting it up, it was more of a kind of like purging the feelings and be able to walk, and be able to kind of, as you walk and talk, it's brilliant. And create that space for other people to walk and talk with me. So yes, that's, I mean, all these people on here have had devastating loss as well, and no loss is less or more. I've also had people saying, oh, you know, you've lost your mum, but it's not like a child. I know, but you kind of also don't want to be the hero of your own story all the time as well. And you kind of, well, I've lost my brother too, you know. So it's that whole sitting with other people's pain and empathy, and also not being the hero of your story all the time as well. So it's kind of leading into that and being able to really open that space for everyone. Everyone belongs and everyone's welcome, and everyone should have that space. So I just think the Good Grief Trust is doing an amazing job. And you know, Linda, it's tremendous, and it's a fantastic, and it's still so in its infancy. There's so much to do. There's so much we can do in order to create this wonderful space. So thank you for letting me tell my story.
Well, thank you for telling your story, Natasha. And I'm just so sorry for everything with your mum and not having the support that she clearly needed. And I'm so sorry that wasn't offered to you, and for your brother as well. But thank you for sharing your story. And it's only through hearing stories like that that we can learn. You know, we don't say move on, we say move forward. You know, it's just even simple things like that, because moving on means you've forgotten about them. They're done, they're dusted, you're moving on with your life. You're never going to move on. You know, you move forward and you find another way. You find what we call a new normal, or you find hopefully new hope. And yeah, I mean, I'm just again looking in your book, Kathryn, and there is so much here that is so useful. So please do look in this book, everybody. But there's a chapter, well, listen, advice from bereaved people about making contact. And as we know, it says grief is not an illness, it is a response to loss. And there are some brilliant pointers. You know, please don't avoid us. You don't have to cheer us up. Say their name. How are you? Is too big to answer. As Kathryn said before, you know, try and do little sound bites. Practical help can be welcome. Remembering to check in is supportive. And sometimes, I mean, I know personally people have said, well, I think I don't want to bug somebody or upset them by keep phoning them or texting them. I mean, what do you think about that, Kathryn and Greg? I mean, should we do that? Should we phone someone? Should we text them? How should we do that if we think somebody's grieving?
Great question. And of course, I would start by asking them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Great answer.
I mean, one of the things that I realized very early on, looking after my sister, while she was still alive, she had bone cancer. And I'd read all the books and she hadn't, and she was doing it wrong. She was dying wrong. And I knew how it should have gone, and the structures we should have in place, and the conversations we should have been having, and all the chat on end of life and everything else. And she was just doing it wrong. And the universe kept thumping me in the face time and time again with it. So absolutely, ask them what they need. It's not your gig. You're the roadie. That's all. You're humping the sound equipment. They're on stage with the Fender playing the gig.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you say, Kathryn, please don't try to justify this death with he's in a better place. Her suffering is over. The good die young. At least instead, just say that you recognize our pain, that you remember our dead person. This is hard. I'm so sorry it's hurting you. I can't imagine how sad this is for you, but I'm here if you'd like company. I'm so sorry they died. I'm sending all my love to you. I've been remembering that time when. And that's really precious, isn't it? I've been remembering that time when is such a gift.
Yeah. And to be able to send a message and at the end of it say, no need to reply. Because that's the other thing, that we want to be supportive, but we don't want our support to become a burden. So it's okay to send messages and say, no need to reply. And that's a great kindness. Of course, people will reply. And the other thing is to offer availability. If you feel like some company, I'm free these times this week, no pressure. here if you need me. This time of year, there'll be people who would normally go to Christmas things with their dead person. So this year they've got nobody to go with. So do we not invite them because that's awkward? Or do we look surprised when they turn up? Well, why don't we just invite people and say, we're doing this on this date. I understand that you might not feel like it, but you can decide at the very last minute. And we'd love to see you if you feel up to it, and you don't even have to stay very long. But if you can't come, that's fine. Or it's the work night out. Let's offer to our bereaved colleague that one of us will go along as their companion, their traveling companion, be there with them, leave at the point they decide that they want to leave. Let's just help people to step back into the socializing that they might be starting to feel ready to do now, because it's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. They're nearly ready now. It's 20 years. They might get to the Christmas party this year. The right time for a person to go back into socializing is the time when they feel ready to go back into socializing. There are no rules. Let's just be kind.
Absolutely. There's no timeline for grief, is there? There are no rules. There is hopefully no judgment. It's up to that person. Grief is completely unique. As we say, it's like our DNA, and you have no idea how it's going to affect you until it happens to you. Yeah. So yes, those sort of preconceived ideas that we've all got, and the assumptions that, you know, a year on people should be fine, you know, they've had their anniversary and now they're getting back to the real world, if you like. Yeah, and I think what you've just said, Kathryn, is so important at this time of year, isn't it? Because the pressure is on to maybe go out and meet people, although, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic again. But, you know, in the normal world, yeah, I mean, what do we do? I mean, it is taking that pressure off, because as we said before, grief changes on an hourly basis. So please just be gentle. And if somebody really doesn't want to turn up at lunchtime, they might be okay by tea time, you know, that sort of thing. Greg, what do you think about that?
No, absolutely. And possibly carrying on that thought, or on a side point, there's not a lot of chaps here this evening. Oh. And that's John Woodhouse. Congratulations. You're here. You're a beautiful man. But no, but this is really interesting. I do an awful lot of stuff. Kathryn and I do a lot of stuff together. I do stuff, and I've seen someone from the doulas knocking around somewhere, the end of life doulas that Kathryn and I are both involved with. And one of the things we're trying to do is to get more chaps on board, because chaps are particularly rubbish at all of this, aren't we, John?
Totally agree with you, Craig. We don't want to talk about it, but if you go to Death Cafe, you really realize that you need to listen to people, and you start to understand better. So you're right, absolutely right.
John, what do we do? What do we do? Because I've done a fair bit of stuff. Harry, thank God you're here as well. John and Harry, there's three of us. Let's have a party. Because I've done quite a lot of stuff over the years with men's mental health generally, and I keep trying to push the idea that actually it is stronger. You are butcher and more masculine if you open up. You're more timid and fearful if you clam up, because of course it's perceived as quite the opposite, isn't it? And I don't know quite what to do. And I know, Linda, with your lot, you've got soccer teams, you've got all of this stuff, and you actually have a really good, strong base of chaps around. But I think this is really important. I'm being slightly flippant, but I think it's really important, because we are a kind of 50-50 society still, aren't we, with chaps and women. And it can't just be the people I see before me pushing the conversations with begrudgingly guys in the background going, well, or you know, we have to kick those stereotypes out a bit, don't we? But how do we do that?
Yeah, how do we do that? And as you say, we've got groups for the bereaved fathers like Sands United, which is fantastic, and that's specifically for dads who have lost a baby or a young child. But you know, what about everyone else? you know, like you, Greg, who's lost a sister, or anybody, we do definitely need to get the guys talking a little bit more. And we have men's sheds, and we try to do as much as we possibly can. But yes, that is a sticking point. And we'll try our best to see how we can push through those taboos and barriers, and definitely try and find a way for us all to open up.
And can I just, Harry?
Yeah.
Harry, why are you here?
I'm a student nurse, with an interest in palliative care. I read Kathryn's amazing book on the suggestion of my tutor. You know, I have a limited experience with death. A family member recently passed away, and I was sat in the funeral looking around at everyone and seeing the memories being shared. And I thought it was very interesting in how we were coming together as a group. And that was the first time I think that family had all been there together, and that it didn't have to be a scary process. And I really wanted to find ways of bringing that into my practice moving forward to help, you know, everyone, but also the men, like you say, open up a bit more, talk to someone, and have that nurse in the room who is a bloke, they're willing to listen to them in a way that they may not want to with a female colleague of mine.
It's so important. Thanks, Harry. That's amazing. And yeah, the more, I mean, Jules Lewis is online, and I'm sure she'd be able to help as well, you know, with language, because we've spoken to nurses who don't have the language, you know, and get very, very anxious about what to say to bereaved families. And it needs to be, you know, in the medical curriculum, as it is in the school curriculum, as in every curriculum, really, shouldn't it? In that training.
Linda, just to quickly say, there's these lovely little cards from the grief recovery method, and it's got never say and then what to say. So they're really helpful, because as Kath said, you know, Kathryn, sorry, I keep on calling you Kath. Kathryn, Dr. Kathryn Mannix. You know, if you're unsure what to say, the best thing to say is, I don't know what to say. I can't imagine how difficult this is for you, you know, and that's so important. So there's these little cards that I give out to some of our staff to help them, because I really want to help staff to be able to do this well, because we really need to all use kind and compassionate language. So it's really important. So thank you, Harry. And I think the Good Grief Trust, as you say, we had a lot of men on Thursday at the launch, and we've got more men interested to be ambassadors. So we really are, I think, doing great, but the men don't come forward. I was talking to a lovely chap on Thursday. I won't name him, but he really shared a lovely story with me, and he is doing a lot of work to encourage men to open up and talk. And I thanked him for all he's doing, and, you know, try and get others to help and spread the word. And if it's not football they're into, there's a lot of walking, grief walkers going out with men, chatting, because they might not want to talk to us females, although many did talk to me on Thursday, and it was a pleasure and a privilege to hear their stories.
As Jules says, we're working a lot with the police this year and next year, and trying to get bereavement support out to the officers as well, in the emergency services and the ambulance and the fire brigade, etc. And those are predominantly men as well. So yeah, we do need to all join in this conversation, this tender conversation.
And I'd like to say something about tenderness, because I think we must be really clear that tenderness is not weakness. Tenderness is an enormous strength. It requires a decision to give up the power in this conversation and be a companion instead of being in charge. And I'm the mother of a son, and I know other parents of young people with very strong bodies who have to learn how to manage their strength and temper it with tenderness. And this is how we manage our emotional strength, in a way, with tenderness. It's a determination, it is a decision, it's very, very difficult to be tender. But actually, if we call these conversations tender conversations instead of difficult, challenging, courageous, all those other words, all those words that make us put our armor on, what we're saying is, actually, do you know what I'm doing? In the face of the danger that I don't know what to do, I am taking my armor off. I am putting my shield down in front of you, and I am, to some extent, at your mercy. And that is an act of enormous courage.
Well, I think very, very powerful words. Thank you, Kathryn, because I think that explains exactly what we all could be doing. As you say, that's quite a difficult thing for many of us. And as you say, there's a lot of noise generally around, and maybe we need to just have a little bit more silence in our lives and listening. Well, I've really enjoyed it. I hope everybody online has had something. There's been so many questions. I don't know if anyone wants to say anything before we close. We've got lots of comments, so thank you so much for your encouraging comments about our speakers, and obviously with Kathryn and Greg and Natasha and Jules. Thank you so much, everybody. Please do raise your hand. We've probably just got a couple of more minutes if anybody would like to say anything before we leave. We're right on the time, but I'm sure if there is anybody who really wants to say something, and I know I've noticed a couple of comments that obviously a lot of you are newly bereaved or you're particularly struggling. Please come to the Good Grief Trust. We run our virtual cafes, and you can get immediate peer support by meeting other people online, and that's probably the quickest way to meet other people who maybe have been through a similar experience, or at least they have been bereaved. So please do look on the goodgrieftrust.org on the pop-up cafes. We have cafes in the community, but we also signpost obviously to people like Sue Ryder and to Cruz and to Child Bereavement UK and to SOBS, and whatever bereavement that you might have experienced, we hopefully will be able to find tailored support for you. So please do get in touch with the goodgrieftrust.org. But thank you so much, everybody. I can't see any raised hands at the moment. But we will be sharing.
Nadine Willis.
Yes,
sorry to interrupt, but Nadine Willis has her hand up.
Nadine?
Yeah, Nadine Willis.
Hi, Nadine. Where are we? Would you like to unmute yourself, Nadine? I can find you.
She's saying in the chat she needs to be unmuted.
Oh, there we go. I've asked you to unmute, Nadine. See if you can make it work. Hang on, I'll ask you again. Oh, there we go. Have you managed to unmute yourself? Oh. Try again. Do you think you could maybe type it in? It says, I'm obviously asking you to unmute, but for some reason it's not working. I'm sorry, Nadine. Is there a question? If you wanted to type it in, we'll wait for you, Nadine, if you wanted to type it in. But yes, please do, everybody. Know that there is support, and thank you so much, everybody, for coming along. But we're waiting for Nadine. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's not letting you. All right, carry on. We'll wait, no worries.
I'll just do a little dance for everyone.
Oh, good.
No, I mean, we're all the time talking about words and appropriate words, aren't we? And maybe for chaps, human is a more appropriate word than tender. Let's put it out there to the chaps. What do we think? Because I think there's a lot of guys that, unless they've got 8 pints of Newcastle Brown in them, find it difficult to be tender. And then I don't know. Just a thought. Because I've had an awful lot of conversations over a lot of topics with a lot of people, and actually just the choice of word can open up the conversation. and a certain word used can deny a conversation. So Kathryn, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I'm going to ponder that. So I like that idea. It is simply about bringing ourselves to be completely present, isn't it? And not imagining that we are going to make it better. We're prepared to be alongside somebody and hurt with them. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So Nadine, thank you. Sorry you haven't been able to speak, but Nadine says, how do you acknowledge your own grief while sitting with someone in their bereavement? Is there a way to be able to sit with your own bereavement and be able to hold space for someone else in a student nurse role? What do you think, Kathryn?
Oh, Nadine, isn't it really, really hard when we take our whole self to work, and our whole self includes the part of ourself that's hurting, and then professionally we have to somehow suspend that to be beside other people who are hurting. And I think what I've discovered over the years, and I know we've got Professor Kate Fleming on this call, so she might like to stick something in the chat box, please, Kate. My sense is that I used to think that I had to not be hurting. I had to come in and be very professional. And we can't do it. We can't split ourselves like that. So actually, I think sometimes what we do is we bring our hurting self, and our hurting self actually discerns this other person's pain more clearly. Now, clearly, if we then lose it and they're having to console us because we've completely lost it and we're a pile of snot and tears, then we've overstepped a line there, haven't we? But I think to be able to say that I can see how really terrible this is for you, in a voice of genuineness, because you're speaking from your own broken heart. I don't think we need to share our own experience. I think it's probably a bad idea mostly to share our own experience, but to call on that experience to be part of the strength that we're bringing to the situation, but also to remember we need to enhance our own self-care while that's happening. Who's looking after us when we're not at work? What are we doing to make sure that we're properly looked after when we're not at work? And one of the difficulties for people who are professional helpers or people who are volunteers in helping organizations is that helping disposition usually translates into being the person who's the helper in the family as well. So we do all of the helping for everybody and we don't take help back. And our discipline is to learn how to be helped, how to seek help and how to accept help. I hope that helps, Nadine.
Oh, thank you, Kathryn. And just maybe just very quickly, sorry to keep everybody. Candy, you've got a question.
I do. Mine's for Natasha, if she's able to answer me. I run a local Medway death cafe, part of my death grief group thing we do locally here. But we've been Zoomed to death over the pandemic. And I was actually interested in your grief walks. How do I go about setting up one locally to me?
Oh, I would love that. Okay, well, if we can get, I'm sure Linda can give you, I don't know how that works, my number or email or something, and then maybe we can connect. Is that possible, Linda?
Absolutely. Why, if anybody does want to connect with anybody, please just email us. I'll put it in the chat. hello@thegoodgrieftrust.org. And we will get in touch on your behalf. hello@thegoodgrieftrust.org.
I would love to do that. That would be an absolute pleasure. And let's start them. That would be great.
Oh gosh, amazing. And so this week is all about walk and talk, stop for a chat, put the kettle on, and please check in on your neighbours. So I will close it now because I think we've kept all our guests long enough. But huge thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. Massive thanks to Kathryn and to Greg and to Natasha and Jules and everybody online for sparing the time to try and make ourselves feel a little bit less awkward maybe, and help each other to really open up and as you said, Greg, make those sort of human connections and those human conversations. So massive thanks. Please look on the Good Grief Trust and the National Grief Awareness Week.org. We've got another couple of days of the campaign, and then please, on the final day of the campaign, we're asking for everybody just to light a candle at 6 p.m. on the 8th of December to remember somebody who's died and just to support those people who are grieving. We'll be lighting up County Hall and the National Theatre and many London landmarks, national landmarks and buildings across the country in orange, just so that we can all come together as one and just try and support each other. So huge thanks everybody, and we will see you very soon. And thank you again to all our lovely speakers.
Thank
No.
you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.